Welcome, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch break if you had one, depending from where you are connecting. I'm very glad to welcome you today to this webinar. For those who don't know, my name is Rita Jonušaitė. I'm an advocacy coordinator for EU DisinfoLab, and I have this immense pleasure today to guide this webinar. Until a bit more people join, we also would like to use an opportunity and get to know a bit our audience. So if you don't mind, you can scan the Slido code here and tell us where you're coming from. And I'm seeing that people are typing in their answers. Belgistan, okay. USA, okay. I don't know exactly the time difference. I think it's what, 7-8 hours or so. So thanks for joining, given the time difficulty. Finland, UK, Spain. Oh my gosh, Spain, a lot of sun. We miss sun in Belgium. So if by any chance somehow you can send the Spanish sunny vibes, please do that. We very much would appreciate that. We have Germany joining. And who else? Canada, fantastic. Poland. We have quite a diverse crowd. Again, very much appreciate you guys joining. I'm sure it's gonna be a great event. We also would like to know which sectors do you represent? Are you coming from a private sector, NGOs, maybe public administration or media? So far, all the participants say to be from NGOs. This is great. Let's see if we have a bit more diversity, and we do. Academia, public administration, other, okay. The crowd is becoming a bit more diverse. Private sector, that's also fantastic. Very good. We're gonna do it for another 5 minutes, and we can, well, not 5 minutes, actually a minute, and then we can go ahead. But that's a good look. I think we are fine. We can proceed. So for those who joined a bit later, again, my name is Rita. I work for EU DisinfoLab. I have this pleasure to host this webinar today. Couple of housekeeping rules before we start. First of all, you will be able to ask questions after the presentation of our dear guest today. And then also this webinar is going to be recorded and then later on put on YouTube on our channel. So you will be able to go back and maybe rewatch the parts that were the most interesting for you, but also share it with your colleagues and friends and disseminate it further. So today's webinar is discussing FIMI, or if we break this abbreviation into more understandable words, foreign information manipulation and interference. And today, the topic of it, or helping us to understand what is exactly FIMI, what this acronym means, given that it became quite popular among European institutions and member states, is our dear guest, dear researcher of EU DisinfoLab, Nicolas Hénin. And a couple of words of Nicolas. Nicolas has been a journalist for quite a long time. Before he joined the EU DisinfoLab, he was a war zones reporter for, I think, almost 2 decades. If not, Nicolas, please do correct me. Made a mistake there. Nicolas afterwards wrote a couple of books. He actually wrote a comic, and I think a children's tale, which I took a look. If you have a chance, please, I recommend to take a look because it's actually very fascinating. But aside from that, Nicolas also wrote a book about Russian influence networks in France. And actually, this was something that got him into researching foreign interference and manipulation. And, you know, as a natural continuity of Nicolas' work here at the EU DisinfoLab, but also his interest and expertise on FIMI, we are presenting you this webinar. And that's enough of me speaking. I give the floor to Nicolas. Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rita. So as you said, FIMI is becoming very popular, and that's a word that is being seen and more. And it's at least since 2019 that EU bodies are mobilized on this field, and at least from what is visible in terms of official text. And this new consideration has led to efforts of both definition and also new means, new tools. And though it is important to distinguish and articulate, and that will be my aim, between FIMI and disinformation. So the EU provides a complex definition of FIMI that partly overlaps the one of disinformation, but not totally. And this definition is interesting because it strengthens counter-interference, and it offers to provide new tools to counter manipulation of information that can also help other fields of disinformation. I just would like, before I really start, to say a disclaimer. I put a lot of insight in my paper, and I will. There's a paper that I that was just published yesterday on our website, and I will keep putting some insight in my presentation. So feel free to disagree, please do. And also, FIMI is quite a new and complex subject. It has not yet been much researched, and the literature on it is still limited. I did my best to read and review the best sources, but I may have missed or misunderstood some points. And well, humility is a source of knowledge. If I made a mistake, please don't hesitate to flag it. So after this, let's start with a summary of my speech on the first slide, with three main evolutions for me that came along with this word FIMI. The first one, we have a refocusing of interest on behavior and operating method. We all know the ABC of disinformation, or ABCD or ABCDE, but in this definition in FIMI, other letters are left over. The big focus is on the B. FIMI is characterized through a pattern of behaviors. Second, an increased use of terms and processes that are imported from cyber threat intelligence, CTI. FIMI actors are taken just like cyber threat actors. So we consider that they use TTPs, techniques, and procedures that can be identified as APTs, advanced persistent threats. We will see all that later. And the third big novelty is a holistic approach, mobilizing all of society's resources. So state actors cannot do everything alone. They need the civil society. And a similar move, by the way, have been seen with violent radicalization. So when the RAN has been created by the EU Commission, and well, the RAN, I'm also a member of it, and I see a similar move being done by EU institutions. So the last 2 points, CTI and civil society favors the adoption of common terminology. We will have many partners having to qualify incidents, to share findings. We will need a common taxonomy, common language. We all have in mind the first draft typology, which is a founding document in disinfo studies. And I would say that this taxonomy is something equivalent, but much more advanced than this first draft typology. So there is also a split of interference operations into phases, and the consideration of counter actions that aim at disrupting these operations. So let's start with the definition. The definition of FIMI, this is the one that is offered by the EAS, and I propose to break it down for you, to unpack it in order to consider the meaning and the consequences of every part of it. So the first important part is that it is mostly non-illegal. It may look at the first glance more difficult to counter it because it's, of course, more difficult to counter actions that don't break the law. But at the second glance, I would say we are reassured because it's not the first time that policymakers or that even the industry or platforms are facing such a dilemma. This is what is commonly defined as harmful content in the terms of service of platforms or services, online services. So, which is not sometimes illegal per se. I invite you to this regard to have a look at the entry harmful but lawful in our glossary of disinformation that we published recently on our website. The second term that is very important and that is really critical is the pattern of behavior. So this is, for me, the major evolution. Definition of disinformation is commonly attached with ABC, the famous ABC, or the ABCD or the ABCDE, depending on which how much you like to update it. So this time, we can notice a clear shift of the focus to the B, to the behavior. So this shift is to a big extent the result of several constraints by the EU Commission, because the Commission is quite uncomfortable with the A and with the C, because actors and contents are highly political, they're controversial. So the only actors, for instance, that are addressed in the last report recently published by the EEAS are Russia and China. And the service explains that this focus is a result of limitation by its mandate and by its strategic priorities. Narratives are also quite controversial. They are political issues. On the other hand, behaviors, they are quite easy to handle. You can make a very clinical, neutral, objectivized description of TTPs. And that's a good point. And the other good point with mostly handling TTPs is that they will be, they can offer frameworks or countermeasures and allow the translation in CTI terms, I would say. The other part of the definition that is important is strengthens or potentially impact values, procedures, and political processes. So this is a wake-up call. I would say that FIMI is strategic by nature. It focuses on the threat of the citizens' perception of political integrity. So the EU definition of FIMI aims primarily at political disinformation, either the one that tends to favor one side of the competition or the one that undermines trust in institutions or in the democratic process. But it also includes any information manipulation that may cause public harm, especially on topics such as health, environment, especially in climate or security. The other very important point in the definition is manipulative, intentional, and coordinated. This is to say that FIMI actors are, well, first, they use deception with the intent to harm, that they operate in groups. They can be identified as entities. CTI expert would call them APTs, and they follow patterns. I also, in this slide, underlined the points on the actors. They can be state or non-state, as well as the localization of the operation. Now let's have a look at the tactics, techniques, and procedures, what we call the TTPs. Well, to make short, this is the definition of TTPs in the context of FIMIs as provided by the EEAS. So tactics describe operational goals that threat actors are trying to accomplish. Techniques are actions describing how they try to accomplish them, to achieve them. Procedures are the specific combination of techniques across multiple tactics or stages of an attack that indicate intent and may be unique for different threat actors. Once again, let's unpack that. First with tactics. Tactics are often described using, previous slides here, are often described using the 5D model. What is that? D as dismiss. So dismiss allegation and denigrate the source. D as distort the narrative and twist the framing. D also as distract, to shift attention and blame to a different actor or a different narrative. Dismay to threaten and frighten opponents. Or divide, this is the 5th D. Actually, the 5th D, I would say there is a 5Bs. So divide to generate conflict and broaden divisions within or between communities and groups. But I like to say in this 5th D, divide but also demoralize, because a divided community lacks the will to fight. Let's move still on this slide on the techniques. So techniques can be sorted according to the stages of the operation, i.e. plan, preparation, and execution. In order to work with common terminologies, there have been, over the last years, specific code books that have been developed, especially one named the Disarm Framework that we will see in a little time. And basically crossing tactics and techniques will allow, as you will see now on the following slide, will allow to identify procedures which can be visually represented as, this time next slide, yes, that can be, so this is a result of crossing TNT. So we have, what we can see on this slide is a TTP's frequency heat chart. This chart is taken from the last EES report that has been published a couple of months ago, and the first report on the matter. And based on the data analyzed, and the data that are displayed on this chart are drawn from, a limited number. So this is just an example of around 100 incidents that have been flagged over a few weeks from October to December 2022. And what we can see from this chart is, for instance, that FIMI is mostly intended to distract and distort. So we have two Ds that are highlighted, and it is mainly image-based. And this work of definition and taxonomy provide tools and the basis for a description of the operation, as does, and we will see it now, the Disarm Framework. So this framework is a description matrix. So it looks very complicated. You don't have to learn it, to read it all or learn it by heart. It's more a picture, and all the references for these documents and all you can find them, of course, below on the slide. But they're also mentioned in the paper that was published in our website yesterday. So this framework is a description matrix of disinformation operations focused on the behavior of the attacker and described through the TTPs. So this is a way to consider disinformation that is totally imported from CTI, from cyber threat. On this slide, you can see the different steps of an influence operation and the different techniques that can be deployed at each of these steps. According to the level of sophistication of the attack, of course, more or less of these techniques will be used. So to give you, at this stage, especially if you're not familiar with something like that, it may look extremely complex and complicated. So basically, disarm is based on 3 sets. For each of the sets, there is a letter. If we come back very shortly to the previous slide, you can see T on the so T, no, the following one, the heat map. Yes. So T stands for a technique. So every technique is identified with T followed by a number. Every of this technique is related to a tactic stage. For instance, T0007 stands for create an authentic social media pages and group. It belongs to the tactic stage TA15. We can go back to the disarm chart. The second set is F. F stands for the detection method. For instance, F00062 stands for detect when dormant account turns active. And eventually, there are the C list. The C list are the list of the countermeasures. For instance, C000189, yes, don't ask me for the meaning, any meaning in the numbers, stands for ensures that platforms are taking down flagged accounts. So basically, everything that every concept that we use in our daily language will be encoded into the system. And the idea is from this disarm attack framework to create from it a defense framework, because for each and every tactic or offense operation, we will see on the following chart that we have a counter, but at least one potential defense action, and these are the countermeasures, and they are also encoded. So this kind of encoding incidents and bricks of the incidents is a result of a strategy that has been developed since since 2011 by Lockheed Martin in the field of CTI. And this is this technology has been named the kill chain. What does kill chain means? It means basically that we start from the observation that threat actors performing an information operation has to follow steps to deploy their attack. So the kill chain concept invites us to understand the attacker's behavior and to potentially even anticipate this behavior in order to kill the attack by blocking the operation at any of these steps. So to this regard, I invite you to read a recent article by Meta's leading researcher Ben Nemo and Erin Hutchins, in which they have described how a kill chain model can be adapted to malicious influence operation. And this the reference to this article is also in my report. And it's important to read this report because, and this is the last novelty I would like to introduce with FIMI. It is the priority that is given to inclusivity, because one of the pillars of the European strategies, but not only European, but also European strategy, is to build a community of defenders. So with these new tools and the aim to involve large parts of the community, so either NGOs, CSOs, private sector, academia, and many more. The aim is to build capacity. But if you want to create a working community, then, well, typically you need two things. You need a common language and you need a meeting room. So the common language is the structure threat, information expression. So the sticks here below this weird word. This is an open source language, but it's also a serialization format that is used already and once again imported from the field of CTI. And so the EAS started encoding FIMI incidents in the sticks format with the goal to develop a structured language for describing cyber threat information to share, store, and analyze in a consistent manner. And the advantage of breaking FIMI incidents into very little bricks is that any contributor, even a contributor that has a very little tiny partial information to share, it will be able, through this encoding and through this, also the Isaac that we will see also, it will be able to contribute and to contribute to increase the situational awareness. And basically, this is exactly how any intelligence service works. I mean, if you're a spy, you don't know, you don't have a clear view of the apparatus of the enemy, but you will gather small bits, and you don't have also a clear view of what your own agency knows, or a complete or a comprehensive view of the knowledge of your own, of your employer. But you will still bring some little bricks, and even if your brick is very partial, even if you didn't understand it all, well, it will, shed light on something much more general, because it will be consolidated through the analysis. And this is the second point. And there are wrong way on the slide. So the EAS has tasked a consortium to develop an information sharing and analysis center, also named Isaac, to adapt DISM and sticks to FIMI. The idea is to encode and share the research, and also to update the frameworks, because what we want to do is to flag the findings and the practical case studies in order also to improve these frameworks. So it has become very technical, my presentation. I hope I didn't lose you. And it's already I think time to wrap up, and I would like to conclude with some personal assessment. So what should we think about it all, to my modest opinion? So firstly, I think that even if there are differences between what is recovered under FIMI and under disinformation, the doctrinal evolutions that I developed in this presentation or in my paper, and they will impact the whole field of disinformation studies. I clearly see a move towards more codification in our work. We will more encode the incidents that we flag. We will also, I think, work more on common languages. All this is quite positive, but we will have to adapt to this new situation. I don't see the reason why the tools developed to counter foreign information operations wouldn't be used also and exported against domestic ones, well, to counter domestic operations. And I see that very positive, because it is also a response to I think you can, excuse me, but I see my colleague a bit worried. You can start asking questions on Slido. So
if you're wrapping up, yes.
Yes, I would like still to develop a bit my wrap up, but
you have enough time. You can finish another minute or two. Perfectly fine.
Okay. So yes, there is no reason not to use all these tools also for domestic disinformation, especially since well, foreign manipulation of information loves to rely on local proxies and to and they love to blur boundaries between foreign and well, their operation and domestic operations. So second point, this approach of FIMI brings new tools, but it also raises new questions. For sure, these new tools will not replace the old tools, and this focus on the B of behaviors will not allow us to make the economy of the A and the C. So yes, of course, it is important to formalize, to encode, and to classify adversary techniques, and to draw profiles allowing attributions, even, because this is at the end of the day the one of the big point with APTs. It helps for the attribution, but we will still have to work on the denial of false information. We will, and I have the feeling that in the recent years, everything was about fake news. So fact-checking was seen as the ultimate answer to disinformation. And no, fact-checking is not enough. It is not sufficient. But we will still need fact-checking, and fact-checking will not be replaced by this kind of behavioral studies or this kind of technical qualification. And for the same reason, we will still need to analysis of actors, a political analysis of actors and their goals, even though we can understand that they are sensitive for the EU, and especially when you have a look at the last findings by what's the name? Forgotten Stories. So there, Team George and the rest. So all this is well, we still need to have this work on actors, and eventually on the inclusion of new stakeholders. So of course it is welcome, but it will take time and resources. We will have to train a lot of people. We'll have to train researchers, policymakers, because only then we will mainstream these new concepts and these new tools, especially since they are quite complex. You don't learn a new language overnight, and you don't either learn everything about FIMI in just 32 minutes or so presentation. So thank you for your attention, and